The massive ship appeared without warning above Earth's blue skies. It was larger than any city humans had ever built, its dark metal surface covered in strange symbols that seemed to glow with their own light. Around the world, people stopped what they were doing and stared up at the sky in wonder and terror. President Martinez was in the middle of a meeting when her aide burst through the doors. "Ma'am, you need to see this," the young man said, his face pale with shock. Within minutes, every world leader was connected to an emergency video call, all staring at the same impossible sight hanging in orbit above their planet. The ship had been silent for 3 hours when it finally spoke. The message came in perfect English, but also in every other human language at the same time. The voice was cold and mechanical, like a computer trying to sound important. "Primitive species of the third planet," the voice began. "You have been discovered by the Galactic Council. Your kind has begun to spread beyond your homeworld without permission. This cannot be allowed to continue." In the emergency bunker, beneath the White House, President Martinez sat with her top advisors, listening to words that changed everything they thought they knew about the universe. General Morrison, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, was already reaching for his phone to contact military bases around the world. "You will comply with the following terms," the alien voice continued. "First, you will provide 40% of your planet's total production each year as tribute to the Council. Second, you will provide 100,000 of your people to serve as workers in Council territory. Third, you will accept a Council overseer to control your expansion into space. You have 30 of your days to agree to these terms." The message ended with coordinates for where Earth's leaders should send their answer. Then the great ship went, silent again, hanging in the sky like a dark moon. Around the world, panic began to set in. Stock markets crashed as people tried to understand what was happening. Religious leaders declared it everything from the end times to a test from God. Scientists worked frantically to study the alien ship, but their instruments could barely detect it, as if it was made of materials that didn't quite exist in normal space. In the bunker, President Martinez looked around the table at faces filled with fear and confusion. "Options?" she asked quietly. Secretary of Defense Williams spoke first. "Ma'am, our military analysis suggests we have no conventional weapons that could threaten something that size. If they have the technology to travel between stars and build ships like that, they're probably thousands of years ahead of us." "What about nuclear weapons?" asked General Morrison. "Even if we could deliver them, which is doubtful, a civilization capable of interstellar travel probably has defenses we can't imagine," Williams replied. President Martinez turned to her science advisor, Dr. Sarah Chen. The young woman had been quiet since the message ended, staring at data streaming in from observatories around the world. "Dr. Chen, what are your thoughts?" Sarah looked up from her tablet. "The technology required for what we're seeing is incredible. But there's something else, something that bothers me about their demands." "What do you mean?" "Think about it. They want 40% of our production and 100,000 people. For a civilization that can build ships like that, what could we possibly produce that they need? And why would they want human workers when they must have automation far beyond ours?" General Morrison frowned. "What are you suggesting?" "I think this isn't about what we can give them. I think it's about control. They want to make sure we never become a threat." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. If Dr. Chen was right, then the aliens weren't asking for tribute because they needed it. They were asking for it to keep humanity weak and dependent. Over the next week, similar ships appeared over every major city on Earth. They did nothing but hang there, silent reminders of the impossible choice facing humanity. The deadline was 23 days away, and the world's leaders were no closer to a decision. Some countries wanted to surrender immediately. The European Union held an emergency session and voted to accept the aliens' terms. "We have no choice," the EU president announced. "We must be realistic about our situation." But others disagreed. Admiral Sarah Chen, Dr. Chen's sister and head of the newly formed Human Defense Initiative, spoke at a closed session of the UN Security Council. "Ladies and gentlemen, I've spent my career studying military history. Every time a technologically advanced civilization has encountered a less advanced one, the same thing has happened. The advanced civilization takes what it wants and destroys what it doesn't need. These aliens aren't offering us a deal. They're offering us slavery. The Chinese representative shook his head. Admiral, what choice do we have? We cannot fight ships like that with our current technology. Admiral Chen stood up slowly. Maybe not, but I've been talking to engineers and scientists around the world. We may not be able to match their technology, but that doesn't mean we're helpless. She activated a holographic display showing Earth's orbital space. For the past 10 years, we've been building infrastructure in space, mining stations, orbital factories, research platforms. Most people don't realize how much we already have up there. The display showed hundreds of human installations throughout the solar system. Some were large, like the Mars colonies. Others were small research stations orbiting distant planets. The aliens think we're primitive because we haven't developed faster than light travel yet. But we've been very busy in our own solar system. And there's something else they might not know about humans. President Martinez leaned forward. What's that? Admiral Chen smiled grimly. We're really good at improvising weapons. As the days passed, secret meetings were held in government buildings around the world. Military planners worked with scientists to develop impossible schemes. Engineers calculated whether mining equipment could be converted into kinetic weapons. Physicists explored whether human technology could be pushed beyond its normal limits. The debate raged in every capital city. Some leaders argued for submission, pointing out that humanity would survive even under alien rule. Others insisted that freedom was worth any price, even extinction. The alien ship remained silent, counting down the days until humanity's deadline. On day 25, something unexpected happened. The ship intercepted a human television broadcast, a news report about the ongoing debates. When the aliens analyzed the content, they discovered something that puzzled them. Humans weren't just debating whether to surrender. They were debating whether to fight a war they knew they couldn't win. Their entertainment was filled with stories of desperate last stands, of small forces defeating larger ones through cleverness and determination. Their history was a long series of conflicts where the losing side had refused to give up, even when facing certain death. Chancellor Vextar, the leader of the Galactic Council expedition, reviewed these reports with growing confusion. In his long experience, primitive species always submitted when faced with superior force. It was simply logical behavior. But as he studied more human transmissions, he began to realize that logic might not be the driving force behind human decisions. These creatures seemed to value something they called freedom more than their own survival. It was an alien concept to him, and a troubling one. With 5 days left until the deadline, President Martinez made a decision that would change the course of human history. She called Admiral Chen to the White House for a private meeting. Admiral, I need to know the truth. If we fight, do we have any chance at all? Sarah Chen was quiet for a long moment. Ma'am, if we fight, we'll probably lose. Most of us will die. Our cities will be destroyed. Our civilization might not survive. But if we surrender, we'll lose something that might be more important than our lives. We'll lose the right to decide our own future. She paused. And there's something else. These aliens have been ruling the galaxy for a long time. They're probably not used to anyone fighting back. Sometimes the biggest advantage you can have is being willing to do something your enemy thinks is impossible. President Martinez stared out the window at the alien ship visible in the daylight sky. In 5 days, humanity would give its answer to the stars. The question was whether that answer would be spoken by free humans or slaves. Chancellor Vextar expected many possible responses from the primitive humans. He had dealt with hundreds of newly discovered species over his long career, and they all followed predictable patterns. Some begged for mercy, others tried to negotiate for better terms. A few attempted to hide or flee to distant star systems. None had ever done what the humans did. The response came exactly at the deadline, broadcast simultaneously from every major city on Earth. President Martinez appeared on screens around the world, standing behind a podium with the flags of every nation visible behind her. Her voice was calm and steady as she delivered humanity's answer to the stars. To the Galactic Council and Chancellor Vextar, we have received your demands and considered them carefully. Our response is simple. No. Chancellor Vextar leaned forward in his command chair, certain he had misunderstood the primitive translation systems. We reject your tribute. We reject your labor conscription. We reject your authority over our expansion into space. Earth and all human territories will remain free and independent. The Chancellor's advisors exchanged confused glances. In 12,000 years of galactic history, no species had ever rejected the Council's initial demands outright. Furthermore, President Martinez continued, we consider your presence in our system an act of war. You have threatened our people and our way of life. As of this moment, a state of hostility exists between humanity and the Galactic Council. The transmission ended. For several minutes, the command bridge of the Council ship remained silent. Sir, the communications officer said hesitantly, should we try to contact their leaders again? Perhaps they misunderstood the consequences of refusal. Chancellor Vextar stood slowly. He was tall, even for a Zephyrian, his blue-scaled skin reflecting the light from the ship's displays. No, they understood perfectly. Begin monitoring all human communications. I want to know what they're planning. What they discovered over the next few days confused and then alarmed the Council forces. Human communications weren't filled with panic or despair as expected. Instead, they heard phrases that made no sense in the context of a hopeless military situation. Total war protocol is now in effect, reported Admiral Chen during a broadcast to all human military forces. All civilian manufacturing is to be converted to military production immediately. All research projects are to be focused on weapons development. All space-based assets are to be prepared for combat operations. The Council's translator struggled with some of the human military terminology. Concepts like mutually assured destruction and scorched earth tactics didn't translate well into any civilized language. Sir, the intelligence officer reported to Chancellor Vextar, we're intercepting some very strange communications from their entertainment networks. Entertainment? At a time like this? Yes, sir. They seem to be broadcasting historical programs about something they call asymmetric warfare. The content is disturbing. The Chancellor reviewed the intercepts himself. Humans, it seemed, had spent much of their history fighting wars where small forces defeated larger ones through unconventional tactics. Their entertainment was filled with stories of desperate last stands, surprise attacks, and victories achieved through sheer determination rather than superior technology. More troubling were the technical discussions he was seeing on human networks. Engineers were openly debating how to convert mining equipment into kinetic weapons. Physicists were sharing theories about improvised nuclear devices. Computer programmers were developing what they called virus weapons for electronic warfare. Sir, his science advisor approached nervously. I've completed the analysis of human psychology and history that you requested. And? Chancellor, these creatures are unique in our experience. Most species, when faced with a superior enemy, will submit to avoid extinction. Humans seem to have the opposite reaction. The more hopeless their situation becomes, the more violent their response. The advisor activated a holographic display showing human historical data. They are the only known species to have used nuclear weapons against their own kind. The only species to have brought their own ecosystem to the brink of collapse multiple times and then recovered. Their entire cultural development has been shaped by constant warfare. Chancellor Vextar studied the data with growing unease. Surely they're not suicidal. Even the most aggressive species has survival instincts. That's what makes them dangerous, sir. They're not suicidal. They're willing to accept massive casualties to achieve their goals, but their goal isn't death. Their goal is victory. No matter the cost. The science advisor highlighted several human conflicts from their recent history. In their Second World War, one of their nations was completely surrounded and facing certain defeat. Instead of surrendering, they began a campaign, of systematic destruction of their own infrastructure to deny it to the enemy. They called it fighting to the last man. The enemy defeated them, surely. Eventually, yes. But the cost was so high that it contributed to the enemy's ultimate defeat by other human factions. The humans learned from this. Now they call it a successful strategy. Chancellor Vextar felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries. Doubt. What are you recommending? Sir, I believe we should reconsider our approach. Perhaps we could offer them a more favorable arrangement. Reduced tribute, fewer workers, limited autonomy. The Chancellor's pride bristled at the suggestion. Absolutely not. The Council has never negotiated with primitives, and we won't start. Now, if they want to learn the hard way, we'll teach them. He turned to his weapons officer. Prepare for a demonstration. Select one of their outer colonies for bombardment. Something small enough to destroy completely, but significant enough to show them the futility of resistance. Sir, which target? Their settlement in the Proxima Centauri system. 20,000 inhabitants, minimal military value. Destroy it completely, then broadcast the recordings to Earth. That should convince them to reconsider. As the Council ship prepared for the attack, human forces throughout the solar system received an encrypted message from Admiral Chen. The message was simple. Phoenix Protocol is now active. All units move to designated positions and await final orders. On Earth, President Martinez held an emergency session with her closest advisors. The alien ship had changed course, heading toward the edge of the solar system at incredible speed. Where are they going? She asked. Dr. Sarah Chen looked up from her calculations. Proxima Centauri, they're going to attack the colony. The room fell silent. Everyone knew what this meant. The Proxima colony was home to 20,000 people, including many of their best scientists and engineers. It was also humanity's first successful interstellar settlement, a symbol of human achievement. Can we warn them? President Martinez asked. Admiral Chen shook her head. The alien ship will arrive hours before any message we send, but it doesn't matter. The colonists know what's coming. What do you mean? Ma'am, everyone in human space received the same briefing 6 months ago when we first started planning for this possibility. Every colony, every station, every ship knows what to do if the aliens attack. On the screen, they watched the alien ship disappear into faster-than-light travel. In 18 hours, it would arrive at Proxima Centauri. In 19 hours, it would learn something important about humans. When the wolf comes for the sheep, most animals run or hide. But sometimes the sheep have been preparing. Sometimes the sheep have teeth. The Council was about to discover that they had made a fundamental error in judgment. They had assumed that because humans were technologically primitive, they were also strategically primitive. They were wrong. In hidden bases throughout human space, weapon systems that had been disguised as mining equipment began powering up. Cargo ships that appeared to be carrying supplies to distant colonies changed course toward predetermined intercept points. Most importantly, a network of communication relays that the aliens had assumed were simple navigation aids began transmitting the final phase of humanity's response to the Council's ultimatum. The message was short, but it would be remembered for centuries. Phoenix Protocol confirmed. All units execute. Humanity's real answer to the Galactic Council was about to begin. The Proxima Centauri colony died in 15 minutes. Chancellor Vexitar watched from his command bridge as his ship's weapons reduced 20,000 human lives to ash and vapor. The settlement's defensive shields lasted exactly 37 seconds against Council technology. The evacuation ships that tried to escape were destroyed before they could reach minimum safe distance. It was a perfect demonstration of the Council's overwhelming superiority. Record everything, the Chancellor ordered. I want the humans on Earth to see exactly what happens to those who defy the Council. But even as his weapons officer compiled the footage, something was wrong. The humans weren't reacting the way they should. On Earth, President Martinez received the news in the White House Situation Room. The images from Proxima Centauri showed nothing but debris where their proud colony had been. 20,000 people, including her own niece, who had been working as an agricultural engineer there, were gone. The room was silent except for the quiet sobbing of a few officials who had known people in the colony. President Martinez stared at the images without expression, her hands clenched so tightly that her knuckles were white. "Ma'am?" General Morrison asked quietly. "Your orders?" President Martinez looked up, and everyone in the room could see something had changed in her eyes. The woman who had tried to find a peaceful solution was gone. What remained was something harder and more dangerous. "Execute Order 827, she said simply. Admiral Sarah Chen, who had been standing quietly in the corner, nodded once and left the room without a word. Within hours, something unprecedented began happening throughout human space. Instead of surrendering or fleeing, every human settlement, ship, and station began implementing what they called the Blood Oath Protocol. The name came from humanity's ancient history, when tribes would swear vengeance that could only be satisfied by the complete destruction of their enemies. But this was no primitive ritual. This was a carefully planned response that humanity had been developing in secret for decades. The first sign that something was wrong came when Chancellor Vextar tried to contact Earth to offer them one final chance to surrender. Instead of government officials or military commanders, his communications were answered by an elderly man in a simple business suit. "I'm James Harrison," the man said calmly. "I own a small restaurant in Kansas. I'm also now the official spokesman for humanity." "Where are your leaders?" the Chancellor demanded. "Gone," Harrison replied. "As of 6 hours ago, all human government and military leadership moved to secure locations that you'll never find. But they left instructions. Every human civilian is now authorized to speak for our entire species." This made no sense to Chancellor Vextar. "You cannot conduct diplomacy through random individuals," Harrison smiled sadly. "We're not interested in diplomacy anymore. You killed our people at Proxima Centauri. That means there's only one thing left to discuss." "And what is that?" "How many of your people are going to die before we're finished with you?" The transmission ended, leaving the Chancellor staring at a blank screen. He turned to his intelligence officer. "Explain to me what just happened." "Sir, it appears the humans have decentralized their entire command structure. Instead of having leaders we can target or negotiate with, they've made every citizen a potential decision maker. That's impossible. No civilization can function that way." But as the Council monitored human communications over the next few days, they discovered that, impossible or not, it was exactly what was happening. Humans were coordinating their activities through a vast network of interconnected communication systems that had no central control point. More disturbing were the messages they were intercepting from human colonies throughout their own space. Messages that shouldn't have been possible. Sleeper Cell 7 reporting. Assets in place on Rigel Station. Awaiting activation orders. Deep Cover Team 12 confirming position on Zephyrian homeworld. Local security suspects nothing. Mining operation Trojan Horse ready to begin Phase 2 extraction on Altair Prime. Chancellor Vexitar called an emergency meeting with his senior staff. How long have humans been infiltrating Council space? His intelligence chief looked uncomfortable. Sir, based on these communications, it appears they've been placing agents throughout our territory for at least 20 years. 20 years? But we only discovered them 2 months ago. Yes, sir. It seems they discovered us much earlier than we discovered them. The implications were staggering. While the Council had been confident in their galactic dominance, humans had been quietly studying them, learning their weaknesses and placing sleeper agents in key positions throughout Council territory. Sir, the communications officer interrupted, we're receiving a priority message from the Council homeworlds. The message was from other species under Council rule, and it was spreading like wildfire through the galactic communications network. The content was simple but terrifying. The humans are fighting back. If they can do it, why can't we? For 12,000 years, the Council had maintained order through the simple principle that resistance was futile. Every species learned this lesson the same way. They were given an impossible choice, they chose wrongly, they were punished, and then they submitted. But humans had changed the equation. They had chosen to fight, and instead of being quietly, destroyed. They were broadcasting their defiance across the galaxy. Sir, the science advisor approached nervously. I've completed the analysis of human space-based infrastructure that you requested. What did you find? Chancellor, we severely underestimated their capabilities. What we thought were simple mining stations are actually disguised weapons platforms. Their cargo vessels are equipped with military-grade engines and armor. Even their scientific research stations have been built to serve as fortifications. The advisor activated a holographic display of human space. Instead of the scattered, defenseless settlements the Council had expected, it showed a carefully planned defensive network that had been under construction for decades. They've been preparing for this war since before they had faster-than-light travel, the advisor continued. Every human installation in space was designed with dual purposes. They can function as civilian infrastructure during peacetime, but they can be converted to military use within hours. Chancellor Vextar studied the display with growing alarm. How did our initial surveys miss this? Because they're very good at hiding things, sir, and because we were looking for the kind of military installations that civilized species build. We weren't looking for a civilization that had militarized its entire society. The final piece of disturbing news came from the Council's own homeworlds. Several species that had been under Council rule for thousands of years were beginning to ask uncomfortable questions about human claims that freedom was worth dying for. Sir, the communications officer reported, we're detecting unusual activity on 17 Council worlds. Increased security alerts, reports of civil unrest, and requests for additional peacekeeping forces. Which worlds? All of them, sir. Every species under Council authority is showing signs of instability. Chancellor Vextar felt the foundations of his worldview beginning to crack. For 12 millennia, the Council had ruled through the simple logic that survival was more important than freedom. Every species they'd encountered had agreed with this logic, but humans were proving that it was possible to choose differently. And if humans could choose differently, then perhaps others could too. Sir, the weapons officer called out urgently. We're detecting multiple energy signatures approaching our position. From where? Everywhere, sir, we're being surrounded. On the tactical display, dozens of contacts were converging on the Council ship from all directions. They moved slowly, like cargo vessels or mining equipment, but they were coming from positions throughout the outer solar system. They're not running, the Chancellor said quietly. They're hunting us. For the first time in his long career, Chancellor Vexitar realized that he might have made a terrible mistake. The humans weren't behaving like any species he'd ever encountered. They weren't trying to hide or negotiate or find a way to survive. Under Council rule, they were trying to win. And as his sensors showed more and more human vessels moving into attack positions, the Chancellor began to understand something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The humans might actually succeed. Chancellor Vextar decided to end the human problem once and for all. Contact the Third Fleet, he ordered. I want 200 ships here within the week. We're going to sterilize this entire system and make an example that will be remembered for 10,000 years. The Third Fleet was the Council's premier military force, equipped with world-cracking weapons and shields that could withstand the explosion of small stars. It had never lost a battle in 3,000 years of service. When the fleet arrived, it was an awesome sight. 200 vessels of various sizes, from massive dreadnoughts to swift attack craft, filled the space around Earth with their ominous presence. Each ship was larger and more powerful than anything humanity had ever built. The human response surprised everyone. Instead of hiding or fleeing, a small flotilla of obviously primitive human ships approached the Council fleet under a flag of truce. The lead vessel transmitted a simple message. We surrender. Chancellor Vextar almost laughed. After all their defiant words and aggressive posturing, the humans had finally realized the hopelessness of their situation. It was exactly what should have happened. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Defense Force, came the transmission from the lead human ship. We realize we cannot win against such overwhelming force. We formally surrender and request mercy for our civilian population. The Chancellor leaned back in his command chair, satisfied. Very well. Have their ships Escort us to Earth orbit. Then we'll begin organizing the tribute collection and labor conscription. The human ships moved into formation around the Council fleet, acting as guides toward Earth. Their primitive vessels looked like toys next to the sleek Council warships, which was exactly what humanity wanted them to think. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UHS Defiance watching the alien ships on her tactical display. She had volunteered to lead this suicide mission, knowing that she would never see Earth again. "Ma'am," her tactical officer whispered. "All Phoenix units, report ready." "Acknowledged," Admiral Chen replied. "Initiate final countdown." Throughout the solar system, weapons that had been hidden for months began their final preparations. They were not conventional weapons by any standard. Humanity had known they could never match Council technology directly, so they had chosen a different approach. The first sign that something was wrong came when Chancellor Vexistar's sensors detected massive energy buildups throughout the outer solar system. Objects that had been classified as asteroids or space debris were suddenly radiating enormous amounts of heat. "Sir?" The sensor operator called out in alarm. "We're detecting energy signatures consistent with..." "That's impossible." "What is it?" "Sir, there are objects accelerating toward us at 15% of light speed. They're coming from everywhere at once." On the tactical display, dozens of contacts were converging on the Council fleet from all directions. They had been hiding in asteroid belts, behind moons, and in the shadow of planets. Now they were revealing themselves as kinetic kill vehicles. Massive chunks of metal and rock accelerated to incredible speeds by improvised human mass drivers. "Activate defensive shields," the Chancellor ordered. "Those primitive projectiles can't penetrate our energy barriers." He was wrong. Council shields were designed to stop energy weapons, particle beams, and plasma torpedoes. They were not designed to stop several tons of metal traveling at 45,000 kilometers per second. The first kinetic projectile struck the Council dreadnought Eternal Glory amidships. The ship's shields flared and died instantly, overloaded by the massive kinetic impact. The projectile punched completely through the vessel, causing secondary explosions that tore the ship apart. "Evasive maneuvers!" the Chancellor screamed, but it was already too late. The kinetic barrage lasted exactly 90 seconds. When it was over, 63 Council ships had been destroyed, and another 40 were severely damaged. The survivors found themselves scattered across the solar system, their perfect formation shattered. But the humans weren't finished. "Now," Admiral Chen whispered. The human escort ships, which had been dismissed as harmless guides, suddenly revealed their true nature. What the Council had thought were primitive cargo vessels were actually heavily armored assault ships carrying the most dangerous weapon humanity had ever created. They rammed the Council ships, not with simple collision attacks, but with vessels converted into massive kinetic bombs. Each human ship had been loaded with several tons of antimatter, carefully contained until the moment of impact. The UHS Defiance struck Chancellor Vexistar's flagship directly. Admiral Chen had just enough time to transmit humanity's final message before her ship's antimatter containment failed. This is what happens to anyone who tries to enslave humanity. The explosion vaporized both ships instantly and damaged a dozen others nearby. Similar attacks were happening throughout the solar system as human sleeper ships, hidden for months in asteroid belts and debris fields, emerged to strike at the scattered Council forces. But the real surprise came from beyond the solar system. "Sir," the communications officer on the surviving Council command ship reported, "we're receiving distress calls from home systems throughout Council space." "What kind of distress calls?" "Coordinated attacks on military installations, sabotage of industrial facilities, and, sir, several worlds are reporting full-scale rebellions." The human sleeper agents, activated simultaneously across the galaxy, were implementing the second phase of humanity's war plan. They weren't trying to conquer Council worlds. They were trying to inspire the species already living there to fight for their own freedom. And it was working. "The Centauri system has declared independence," the communications officer continued. "The Rigel colonies are in open revolt. The mining worlds of the Vega sector have expelled their Council overseers. Chancellor Vexistar, now commanding the War from a heavily damaged cruiser stared at the reports in disbelief. How is this possible? Sir, the humans seem to have been planning this for decades. They've been in contact with resistance movements throughout Council space, providing them with weapons, tactical advice, and coordination. The truth was even worse than the Chancellor realized. For 20 years, human agents had been living, among other species, studying their cultures, learning their languages, and slowly building networks of rebels who were waiting for the right moment to strike. The moment had come when humanity chose to fight rather than surrender. Across the galaxy, dozens of species saw that it was possible to resist the Council and win. The war that had started as a simple punishment action against one primitive world had become a galaxy-wide revolution. Sir, the tactical officer interrupted, we're detecting more human vessels approaching. It looks like their reserve fleet. On the display, a new group of human ships was emerging from behind Earth's moon. These were different from the suicide vessels that had attacked earlier. They moved with purpose and coordination, like warships rather than desperate volunteers. Broadcasting on all frequencies, came the voice of the human commander. This is Captain Rodriguez of the UHS Retribution. To all Council forces in this system, you have two choices: withdraw immediately or be destroyed. Chancellor Vextar looked around his damaged bridge at his demoralized crew. Half his fleet was gone, the galaxy was in revolt, and the humans were still coming. For the first time in 12,000 years of Council history, he gave an order that no Council commander had ever given. All ships, prepare to withdraw from the system. The war was far from over, but the Chancellor was beginning to understand something terrible. The humans might actually win. The war lasted 3 months and 13 days. In galactic terms, it was barely a skirmish, but in those 3 months, 12,000 years of carefully maintained order collapsed into chaos. The Council's mistake had been fundamental. They had assumed that because humanity was technologically primitive, they were also strategically primitive. They had never encountered a species that treated warfare as an art form, that had spent thousands of years perfecting the techniques of asymmetric combat. Humans didn't fight the way civilized species fought. Civilized species attempted to minimize casualties while achieving clear military objectives. Humans turned their entire civilization into a weapon and aimed it at the Council's center of gravity, their authority. The stories that spread throughout Council space were the stuff of nightmares for any military commander. Humans who converted colony ships into kinetic weapons and volunteered to pilot them in suicide attacks. Human infiltrators who had lived for decades among alien populations, waiting for the signal to begin sabotage operations. Entire human settlements that chose to detonate their own fusion reactors rather than allow Council forces to capture them. Most disturbing of all were the videos that humans broadcast across the galaxy, not propaganda about their cause or appeals for support, but simple documentary footage of their attacks. The galaxy watched in horrified fascination as 50,000 human volunteers loaded themselves and a jury-rigged antimatter device onto a converted cargo hauler and rammed it into Chancellor Vextar's flagship. The explosion could be seen from 3 star systems away, but the message wasn't directed at the Council. It was directed at every species that had ever submitted to Council. Authority. This is what freedom looks like. This is what it costs. This is why it's worth it. The response was immediate and devastating to Council authority. Species that had been peaceful for millennia began remembering what it felt like to fight for their own destiny. The Centauri Confederacy declared independence and destroyed every Council facility in their space before the Council could react. The Rigel Mining Consortium expelled their overseers and announced they would no longer provide resources to the Council fleet. Most catastrophically, the Vegan agricultural worlds stopped food shipments to 70% of Council space. Sir, Admiral Kethtar, the Chancellor's replacement, reported to the emergency session of the Council leadership. We estimate that 40% of our territory is now in open revolt, with another 30% showing signs of instability. The surviving Council members sat in stunned silence. Many of them were ancient beings who had witnessed the rise of their galactic empire. None of them had ever imagined it could collapse so quickly. What about the human homeworld? Asked Counselor Zexthul. Have we at least managed to secure Earth? No, sir. Every attempt to approach Earth has resulted in massive casualties. The humans have converted their entire solar system into a fortress. They're using tactics we've never seen before. The reports from the Sol system read like accounts of battles from some primitive era. Humans were using their own space stations as weapons, literally throwing them at council ships. They had weaponized asteroids, turning mining equipment into mass drivers that could accelerate mountain-sized rocks to incredible speeds. Most disturbing was their use of what they called kamikaze tactics. Named after an ancient human military tradition, entire crews would sacrifice themselves to destroy much larger enemy vessels. The psychological effect on council forces was devastating. They're not just fighting to win, reported the council's chief psychologist. They're fighting to hurt us as badly as possible, even if it costs them everything. Our troops have never encountered an enemy willing to accept extinction rather than surrender. The war's turning point came when humans captured the Council's primary shipyard at Altair Prime. Instead of trying to hold the facility, they converted the entire construction complex into a massive bomb and detonated it when Council reinforcements arrived. The explosion destroyed not only the shipyard but also 87 Council vessels and the entire 4th Fleet command structure. The loss was so devastating that several Council member species began questioning whether the war was worth continuing. Perhaps, suggested Counselor Vexmore during an emergency session, we should consider negotiating a settlement with the humans. The suggestion was met with outraged silence. The Galactic Council had never negotiated with primitives. It was unthinkable. But as the reports continued to arrive from across Council space, the unthinkable began to seem inevitable. On Earth, Admiral Sarah Chen stood in what had once been the city of Geneva. The orbital bombardment that had destroyed the European Peace Council had left a crater 5 kilometers wide where the city center had been. Around her, the ruins of human civilization smoldered under a sky darkened by orbital debris. Admiral, her aide reported, we're receiving surrender requests from Council forces in 17 different systems. Terms? She asked. Complete withdrawal from all human territory, recognition of human independence and cessation of all hostilities. Admiral Chen looked up at the sky, where the wreckage of hundreds of ships from both sides created an artificial constellation. The stars were dimmer now, hidden behind clouds of debris from the battles that had raged through the solar system. What's our casualty report? 3 billion dead, ma'am. 80% of our orbital infrastructure destroyed. Complete loss of the Martian colonies, the Proxima settlement, and 15 other outer system installations. 3 billion people. More than half of humanity's interstellar population. The price of freedom had been higher than anyone had imagined, but they had won. Ma'am, the communications officer interrupted. We're receiving a priority transmission from the Centauri system. Put it through. The holographic display showed a creature Admiral Chen had never seen before. It was tall, with crystalline features that reflected light in rainbow patterns. When it spoke, its voice had a musical quality that the translators rendered as barely controlled joy. Greetings, Admiral Chen of the Human Military Forces. I am Krystal of the Centauri Liberation Front. We wanted to thank you for showing us that freedom was possible. You don't need to thank us, Admiral Chen replied. You fought for your own freedom. Yes, but we might never have tried if we hadn't seen what humans were willing to sacrifice. Your example has inspired 47 different species to declare independence from the Council. The transmission continued with similar messages from across the galaxy, species after species reporting that they had broken free from Council control, following humanity's example of choosing freedom over safety. But the most important message came from Chancellor Vextar himself, broadcasting from his damaged flagship. Admiral Chen, this is Chancellor Vexitar of the Galactic Council. I am authorized to offer terms for ending hostilities. Admiral Chen looked around at the ruins of her world, at the price humanity had paid for the right to determine their own future. What terms? Complete withdrawal of Council forces from human space, recognition of human sovereignty over all territories currently under your control, establishment of formal diplomatic relations between the Council and humanity. And in return, we ask only that you cease your attacks on Council territory and discontinue your encouragement of rebellions among our subject species. Admiral Chen was quiet for a long moment. The Chancellor was asking humanity to abandon the very species they had fought to liberate. Chancellor, I think you misunderstand something fundamental about humans. We didn't fight this war to win territory or gain recognition. We fought it because we believe all intelligent beings have the right to freedom. Admiral, please be reasonable. If every species in the galaxy declares independence, there will be chaos. The Council provides order and stability. The Council provides slavery dressed up as order. We reject your terms. Then what do you want? Admiral Chen looked up at the darkened sky, thinking of all the humans who had died for this moment, and all the alien species who were still fighting for their own freedom. We want you to leave. All of you. Go back to whatever worlds originally formed your council and govern yourselves however you choose. But never again try to rule over others. The transmission ended in silence. 6 months later, Admiral Chen stood in the same ruins of Geneva, but now she was not alone. Representatives from dozens of species had come to Earth for the signing of what would become known as the Galactic Freedom Charter. The Council had dissolved. Some member species had formed new alliances based on mutual cooperation rather than dominance. Others had chosen complete isolation. A few had tried to maintain their old imperial ways and had been overwhelmed by rebellions from their former subjects. Admiral, asked Ambassador Chrysotol of the Centauri Republic, do you ever regret what humanity unleashed? The galaxy is a more dangerous place now with so many independent civilizations. Admiral Chen looked up at the sky. The debris clouds were finally clearing, and she could see stars again. Some of those stars now shone on free worlds that had never been free before. Freedom is always dangerous, she said quietly. That's what makes it worth having. Behind them, construction crews were beginning to rebuild Geneva. The city would be different this time, designed not just for human diplomacy,